second of two sessions spent in discussing the 2015 budget. And whenever the budget is approved, it will have to be read as and then published, what's the deadline on that?
We're publishing, it goes on view November, and then in December, it will be approved, and there's a 20-day length of time that it has to be on view.
Okay. So last time we spent time going over the different line items in the aggregate budget. Today I think we want to go over some departmental stuff, as well as talk about some of the proposed grants that have been requested and how it might be disposed towards them. Now we have time for all the questions and answers. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dean.
Last week, we talked about the report that's on the screen. This week, we had said that we were going to discuss the summary by department. So this one tells the by department groupings, the total revenue on one page and the total expense on the other page. Were there any specific questions related to this report? The underlying numbers are the same, it's just grouped differently.
So there's some whoppers there in terms of the percentage change. You want to just maybe hit on anything as you run down that list of a high percentage change? And by high, I mean, what, above 20%? What in either direction?
I want to make sure I have the right sheet that you're talking about.
Do you want to also?
Page 45.
I'll have to do it. Yeah. You're going to have to hand me my copies now.
Oh,
So you'll have to be forgiving because we're going to have to look off the screen.
well, I probably have it here, I'm just gonna find it.
That's okay. We can live off the screen.
Okay, so our district attorneys.
That revenues are up because, we're moving an employee over to drug task force. Drug task force is gonna reimburse for that employee. And then we're gonna
Or I'll find one for
GIS is going down 25%.
$5,000.
Down there, yeah. Okay, dropping down to the commissioner's office, we already talked about that change, and then it's, we have, what was that? Yeah, people.
That's the revenues.
So maybe that doesn't make sense. If this is
No.
just the, we're more interested in that change, so.
And probably, instead of trying to look at the line items, the three big changes on the revenue side are the district attorney reimbursement for the drug task force that Tammy just talked about. Reimbursements for telephone are increasing. And this is directly related to the prison, and that's reimbursements from the inmates for the telephone calls. And internal revenue for indirect costs are decreasing, and that's mainly because of the nursing. And they had a good uptick in the previous year, so it's levelized. Library also has an increase to the grant for the Shippensburg Public Library. That's passing through us to the library, that's why it's on the books.
That's just a pass.
This is pass-through
I think you
revenues.
stole.
Mhm.
Is all of that's 526,000. All of that's the
500,000.
500 grams of it. So you do it. So
Not at the one time that they were given that. Is that part of our account for the,
It's the
The
current
government.
grant that the.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
that's been in the the works a while.
Yeah, I believe that
Yes,
was.
yeah,
I keep extending it.
okay.
So Dana, I'm looking at the ones here that are just over 100,000 to start. So ERP is up 107.
That's the
Revenues.
Boston upgrade.
That's the less. Prison 429.
Prisons, a lot of that's electricity because of their increased square footage. And the inmates are very high on telephone, transportation, and commissary skills, but all those, you'll see the offset in revenue too for those, so.
Are you on the expense sheet?
I'm actually looking at the revenues when I started that, but that's okay. It's
Okay.
a mirror image. So
That's okay.
I'm sorry, Courts Casa and Law Library, what's the driver there?
Courts has that court fiscal investigator, those two positions are in there in 15, and their conflict counsel services caseload is up. There's also an increase in homicide cases, but it's a little more expensive. And I've got 2 more attorneys managing the increased cases.
You already mentioned prison. Let me ask you about the negatives too. So, but then again, I'm just using 100,000 as a convenient threshold for a second. So the monetary shows a decline of 135,000.
That is the commentary that part of the course on base project that we did in 14.
We flipped over to
Expense.
expenditures now.
Okay. And likewise for the sheriff, 118. Yeah, that's
And this is budget to budget, and so they budgeted for extra cases last year, and they did take that out of the budget this year.
Okay.
Some of that.
And the planning commission,
I think it's part of it's vehicle, part of it is their, our workers' comp rates dropped, which is affecting them.
all right, so that's their share of the workers' comp. What about the vehicle? Because we added that, didn't we?
Hybrid vehicle. I'm just trying to remember the name. One is,
When we budget for capital
Yeah.
in the general fund, we pull it, so what you're seeing in the 14 budget, we have that
been
vehicle
in
in.
and 15.
Okay. Planning commission showing a big decrease at 192.
Land, a lot of that has to do with the, land partnership grants. There's less
Oh.
of those going out, because they all roll up into planning.
Yeah.
So that was one of the biggest things.
Now, do you have personnel in here too? Okay, so Rebecca's position, I don't believe was held in planning. Personnel costs are in here too.
Yes.
Okay, so that would add to some of the,
Some of that would be in there.
And the insurance.
Correct.
right.
Some of these are reflected in pool reserves then, so, but facilities management, 222.
That's up because paving at Redford is in 15.
That's currently under discussion, if that's gonna be done in a different way than originally.
Okay. You already mentioned the libraries as the grant pass-through. Program subsidies, is that a catch-all or it's 551,000?
That would be all of the funds that have a subsidy from the general fund, so it would be all the human service agencies, 911, domestic relations, and then aggregate total is 500.
Centralized DUI court, is that just all the new stuff in the program?
And then 14, when we did the budget, we budgeted for everybody in their respective departments, but for tracking measures, it was decided to keep it as a central department, so in 15, all the expenses are shown.
And I think that we had that conversation because some counties do and do not roll that in collectively.
Correct.
So this sort of drills it down into where we are right now.
Correct.
Okay. Then they're going to talk about, well, how are these costs shown in other counties?
Yes.
But
And this was so that we can see what the actual costs are and measure, because if we put it in the departments, it would get lost with every program.
I guess kind of a step back, big picture question here that I have, just caught my eye, is the revenue summary shows the total revenue increase for the year at 2.13%. So is that both the increased values, including not only property taxes, but the grant revenues and everything?
Yes.
Okay. 'Cause we generally expected about 1% increase is what our revenue from property tax is. So the difference here, the disparity, is that this includes all the grant dollars.
Correct.
Okay, and the total expenditures is 2.62, so it's still outstripping revenue. Am I reading that correctly? 2.62 increase.
Yes, but contingencies also in the general fund budget, so if we took that out,
I see.
it may level it a little bit more.
And what's the rough dollar amount of that?
At the beginning of the year, our contingency is $1,950,000. It's line for
Expense?
Yeah, on old reserves. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
More than just a button pusher.
It's multi-
Always said that.
He's one of my
We always said that.
Do you want to go to the grants? Yes.
Yes, if there's any more
Is
questions.
there any more questions?
Yeah, I'm still trying to clarify a couple things. So in this document summary, it says that we will have spent $73,254,498. Is that right, in the general fund?
That is what the
2014.
2014 budget is. That is not actual expenditures.
All right, so, the actual numbers then of what you gave us on the projections of what we expect to spend before the end of the year is, if I have this correct, it's either $67,967,421, or $68,182,140, or $68,967,421.
Okay.
They were projections that we were given within the past month on different documents.
Yes. The last projection that we gave you was the $68,967,421. That is the updated projections. Projections will change as things occur and happen. And we update those continually to make sure we stay on top of what's occurring in the county.
I want to go back to, you can explain how this shows up and where it shows up then in the summary that just, but in the 17-page budget sheet that you gave us, it shows that you are putting $1 million as part of that $75 million proposed budget in contingency operating. Can you explain that?
What page are you looking at?
I'm sorry, page 7 of 17, 640000.
Okay. That's the $1,950,000 if you added all the lines together in contingency, like we talked about those a few minutes ago, that's contingency. Those are the line items that they sit in.
And that's, you built that in everywhere. That, in other words, if you look at the summary sheet here, then
It's in the 31 line.
it's in the, okay. Items 10 through 57, whatever. It's all built in there. It's contingency,
Correct.
$1 million. Okay. That's not the pooled reserves number, or is it?
It
Well,
is
what-
the pool reserves.
I'm sorry, what?
It is the pool reserves.
It is? Okay. Can you explain contingency wage and benefit where you're essentially projecting to spend an additional, this is 640050, an additional $500,000 for wage and benefit?
That's not a projection to spend an additional $500,000 as a contingency that we put aside. Or we get decisions that are made by the board with salary board actions or changes that occur, we would be able to move that money then into the individual line items.
So it's a cushion in case we have to put it.
It's the $1,950,000 as part of that that we pull aside and manage through finance that's outside of the departmental controls.
And this is not something of recent creation.
We've been doing this since 2004 when we implemented the Nelson software, and it's directly related to the lockdown of budget in the individual departments. We can't spend one penny more in the individual line items, and it would take a full-time job to move money around if we had to lock down that thing.
Then, with respect to the individual line items, again, we have grants of $505,000, 695,000, page 717.
The 500,000 is the Shippensburg Public Library grant. I don't know what the 5,000 is.
Okay, so that's not what we're going to consider here relative to grants.
No.
We don't have that identified as a general category.
It's kind of spread out through.
And then if we were to approve what we suggested for the CAT, instead of 319,000 that you have in this budget, it would be 277,702, if that's what we're going to be. If that's what
It
we
would be
end up
adjusted to whatever you approve. It's just a placeholder for now.
I may have more to say about all that when we get to it, but I guess if we're going to move into the other area of grants, I'll ask a question. What funding do we have available within the constraints of the current revenues for farmland preservation, for Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation, and for the other items? I think there's like 10 items that are on that list there. What funding do we have available within recurring revenues?
I think it's as much or as little as you want. You can pull,
I mean, it's
Can we
difficult.
start this discussion now about the
Sure,
grants?
go right ahead.
I think, and I've been here, this is my second go around on the budget cycle. I survived the first one. I fully intend to survive the second one. One of the things, even though in terms of money-wise, is one of the smaller and less significant things. The grants have caused the degree of grayness in my beard, my hair, but in my beard to increase. And I think the reason is, in part, there's a number of reasons. One, some of these things are controversial. Number two is we don't have any really clear guidelines. We make these decisions either based on, we make these decisions based on a number of different factors, and not always the same factors. It is eclectic. I think that's a nice way to put it. I would like, we had last year, it was the great face-off between KDIC and farmland preservation. Grant me some wiggle room here. And we came to a gentle ladies agreement on that we would seek funding for farmland preservation via other means, and then KDIC would basically, I don't know, did they have anything last year? If they had something, it was nominal. But the notion was that they would achieve self-sufficiency and not need it, and that was sort of a quick pro quo from last year. Yet here we are again this year with both of those heavyweight contenders squaring off in the middle. And in addition to a number of other ones that are much smaller, we also have the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission, which I think they're going to be coming in a little while to talk about their request, and there is almost as much disagreement about that as there is about the Calvary Transit Authority.
Intervene for a moment. We worked very hard to get the Tri-County removed from the so-called grants and placed under the planning budget. So it really should not be considered a grant.
It is technically under the planning department. We moved into this, place it under the planning department. Farmland preservation, tri-county planning, still working on
No, that's not.
I think what I asked my finance is to take all of these things, regardless of where they reside in official budget line, because we have control over, and traditionally, we have made decisions on how to do our ours. And eventually, these things all get discussed, even though, for instance, farmland preservation stuff doesn't become, what's the deal, it doesn't really come onto the books until January of the following year.
It's budgeted in the year that it will be spent.
Right.
Because it's all general fund expense, so it's really not a general fund expense until we spend it.
Okay, so the point being, and I'll end my little preamble here, is that these are discretionary. And as such, this gets back to Jim's original question, we can give as much or as little as we please, but because they're discretionary, they tend to either reflect or be perceived as reflecting those external entities that the commissioners feel are worthy of support. Now, that support can be defined however we decide to define it at the moment. I would love if we could put some kind of structure in here. For instance, one thing to consider is if, and I know the library is not on this list. Let's use the library as a potential example. Library receives funding from the library tax, just like catering receives money from the hotel tax. Does it make sense in terms of all the competing requests for this discretionary and limited discretionary funding? Does it make sense for us to be giving additional funds to organizations such as the library, such as catering, that have already a guaranteed source of revenue from taxes that are dedicated to them? Similarly, for farmland preservation, should we be using this very limited discretionary funding for this purpose, or should we look to other sources to the extent we support that from things like Marcellus Shale funds or what have you? If we could start maybe to, and Tri-County, it's going to come down, it's going to be just like the CAT stuff list. There's stuff that we're willing to pay for and stuff that we shouldn't be paying for because we already have our own planning department that costs us $400,000 a year. So the question is, why are we paying another $103,000 to somebody doing the job that we already do for ourselves? It's not to say we shouldn't give them anything because they do provide services that we need, but should we provide that in cash or should we provide that in services in kind? What would be, so we can jump into this the way we traditionally have, and I think it's a compelling discussion. Or maybe we could try to set some ground rules about how we might want to approach this.
So, if I could, I don't necessarily agree with everything you said, Larry, but I'm sure you'll find that as a surprise. First of all, I want to go back to the statement that was made relative to the fact that, at some point in time, essentially, KDIC was going to be self-sufficient. We wouldn't contribute anything. I never, ever have said that. I think others have said that, but I have never said that. One of the things, and I'll throw this out there, and I've been thinking about this a great deal. But again, it kind of goes back to the question of, what are the funding resources that we have available, and it's very difficult to tell. When we have a proposed spend budget of $75 million, and yet, the recent history shows that we don't come anywhere near spending, let's say recent history, what we budgeted. I'll give you a couple of examples. In October 2010, the financial analysis projected that we would have general fund expenditures of $76.7 million in 2014. In September 2011, the financial analysis projected we would have general fund expenditures of $75.5 million in 2014. In October 2012, the financial analysis projected we would have general fund expenditures of $74.7 million. In October 2013, the financial analysis projected we would have general fund expenditures of $71 million in 2014. In actuality, our general fund expenditure in 2014 will be somewhere between $68.2 million and $68.9 million. Now, that's an $8 million difference between what was forecast just 4 years ago in terms of where the money actually was spent, versus what was projected. Now, this is not a criticism of our finance department. But essentially where we are, at least with the past two budgets, and again, brings me to the question I have. We don't know today, at least I don't know today, as to what is, the realistic budget for 2015 that is within recurring revenues. We're showing, we're going to, essentially have about $71 million, I believe, in revenues in 2015. But this budget proposes to spend $75 million. And we put a lot of money in, spread a lot of money out in the budget, in contingency. The 2014 budget that we passed at the end of last year showed a potential transfer of $3.6 million from reserves and a projected ending balance of $17,474,649. We're now looking at a projected fund balance at the end of 2014 of $21,666,917. So no matter how you slice it, both the 2013 and 2014's budgets were structurally balanced, unlike the budgets approved for 2011 and 2012. Although we did succeed in 2012 in reducing the size of the structural imbalance by year-end 2012. In the end, the 2014 budget we passed showed spending of at least $1 million more than we actually will have spent. So again, I'll just ask the question as to how much funds do we have available within available revenues for 2015 so that we can consider responsibly and make an informed decision with respect to how much we might be able to budget for these things.
Can I correct one thing? We don't know what we're going to spend at the end of 14 yet. It hasn't occurred. So what we're giving is still a projection and subject to change based on actual events that happen through the remainder of the year.
And I know we don't do this, but, if you budgeted a lower number, right, then essentially you don't end up spending more than you actually budget. Now, there may be a need, because otherwise you have a situation that develops like in a lot of places where they flush the budget at the end of the year and they just, buy whatever they want to, because that's one. I know that doesn't happen here, okay? But my point is I think the more you budget, right, the more you can end up spending. And all I'm asking is a simple question, hopefully, it should be a simple question. What funding do we have available within the constraints of existing revenues for these various appropriations? I have thoughts relative to CADIC and I have thoughts relative to farmland preservation as being both being priorities. Tri-County Regional Planning Commission, bottom line is we have a contractual relationship with Tri-County Regional Planning. If we're going to blow that up, then we need to do that. But in the meantime, we have a contractual obligation. We're going to have Tri-County Regional Planning Committee here to justify, just as we did with CAT, the expenditure. Our statement to CAT is essentially, you'll budget what we give you, okay? So that should essentially be the same standard that we utilize around here too. So my question is, again, how much money do we have available to spend? Within the constraints of available revenues, within the tax numbers.
You have budgeted, what amount? 550,000?
No, she told me that's a pass-through, that's dealing with the library or something. She said that grant. So I don't know what that is.
We had placeholders in there based on last year, but they will be changed when you.
So you can take the 2014 number,
Basically.
342,000. So that's what's in there. Now, leaving aside, let's take an existential leap of faith here. Let's assume that this budget is, which has brought us a AAA bond rating and everything else, actually makes a lot of sense and is done appropriately, and that at least the math isn't nearly as fuzzy as it might appear. That with that's 342,000 per the way you've calculated the budget, assuming we keep the contingency, assuming X, Y, and Z, that's the money that we have to play with. If we would go above that, then it would obviously change your numbers and final balances in your projections, and if you do less than that, it would improve. So right now, that's the number that has been, as anticipated, put into the budget to allow for this. We are under no compulsion to either spend that much or more or less. Again, it's as to your preference, how much you want to spend. I mean, we could have a tax increase if we wanted to give millions of dollars to these things, and I don't think, and Commissioner, I know you're not saying that, but it's really the commissioner's discretion to make that determination. You did add the caveat that you did want to do this without raising taxes. The current budget, which allocates $342,000, does not need a tax increase. So I think if you want, for discussion's sake, that $342,000 is a good number to take a look at.
And actually, I would almost say it's really the next column, but because under 14, we did make awards and some of that's been spent like Black Fly. I mean, I think that bill's been paid,
Should be college.
hasn't it? I think
So
Black Fly,
600,000.
How much is that? Come on, Ron. Right, so.
well, but you're adding in cap.
We're in that.
You're adding in cap. So I'm kind of looking at what's been awarded already. I think Cumberland has been paid, fire protection's been paid, some of those have been back already.
So I do really need an answer to my question.
We're trying to get it for you right here.
Okay.
I'm going to go with that column.
What do you want to total this year?
Yeah.
240,000, 239,174.
Can you make that show up?
And that includes Black Fly and Tri-County.
Okay.
Okay.
So again,
So that really is, that's not sufficient. What do we pay Tri-County currently? I don't have that sheet.
Well, it's indicating 81,000 was the budget for it, 14, but the request now is at about 103.
so,
And there's no other dollars, there's no other funds available for you to see.
no, nobody's saying that at all. You can take funds from anything, in any place you so choose to. You can increase taxes, you can finance short-term debt, you could do whatever you so choose to do that. What you said was that you didn't want to raise taxes. The budget that you were presented with doesn't call for any increases in taxes, and this is the line item. Now, that said, you could keep the total number, but move things from, say, like drugs and alcohol, or children and youth services, or the prison, or from the sheriff's department, or from 911. You could move money from there into one of these categories if you so choose. So it is strictly up to your discretion what you want to do.
All right, well, I mean, if we were to read the article, and again, I don't want to just keep harping on this, but essentially, I think the reporter was accurate in his review of our budget chart. He said Cumberland County General Fund expenses may outpace revenues by about $1 million in 2015 if the commissioners do not cut spending or raise taxes. Is that true or false when you look at it in terms of reality?
That's
versus-
absolutely true.
Okay, so we need to cut expenses by $1 million in order to balance this budget, is what you're saying. So we need to,
No, no.
No, that's what it said.
No,
Well, what's the
no,
date of that?
Don't put words in my mouth.
Well, you
I
said it,
said what I said, which is it is possible. It is also possible that it will come in less. It will also possibly come on right on the money. Okay? This is a projection of things that haven't happened. And maybe the reporter who wrote that article has a crystal ball to which he can see the definitive results. Maybe he can bet on an over and under on this and make a gazillion bucks for himself. But the rest of us have to deal with the unknown unknowns. But the odds are that that's going to be pretty darn close.
No,
So as I said during the last meeting when this came up, is we can make that $1 million if that turns out to what we have to do.
And that is not to dismiss the savings that we have already throughout the year. We've been engaged with every department in the county to find those savings. So for me, Bob,
Yeah, I want to defend the reporter because in fact, he was only going by the data that was contained in our, financial analysis committee report to, essentially come up with that headline. What I'm trying to say here this afternoon is that, and I appreciate the fact we've got, this is one of the things I think is important here. One of the reasons we have a AAA bond rating, right, because we have a significant, fund balance. And in fact, right, we also have more money budgeted in the line items than we're actually going to end up spending. Okay? So that's the good part. The good part is that according to the bonding agencies, we're in great shape. Okay? On the other hand, it makes it very confusing, for us as a board of commissioners. And I would also say it's not fair to the taxpayers or our employees, right, not to have budgeted real numbers.
well, I'm not confused. I sort of want to,
No, that's-
differentiate
that's-
that. I'm not,
Well, I'm going to throw this out on the
I'm not
grants.
confused
I'm-
regarding the budget here.
I'll
So-
throw this out on the grants. Well, all I'll say is that, I've been around budgets for 5 years. I've also talked to some budget experts, and, I've never seen a situation where you budget more than you actually need to spend. So this is unusual, and it actually was pointed out as PFM mentioned the anticipated spend line as being, an anomaly with respect to county budgets. But I want to throw this out relative to farmland preservation and Katie in particular, and we're going to have Tri-County come in. And this is something I think actually works to exactly what our chief clerk was talking about. Now, I don't have any specific numbers today because, that's difficult to determine without knowing how much money is available. But I believe it's important that first of all, we take advantage once again of at least 1/2 of the funding that's available to us from Marcellus Shale, and which can be used for limited purposes. One of those limited purposes is for farmland preservation, and I think that's a no-brainer to be able to use those dollars coming from the state to draw down additional state dollars for farmland preservation. In addition to that, depending on the availability of general fund dollars, I think it makes sense to appropriate a certain amount or designate a certain amount of general fund dollars for farmland preservation. It's our, number one industry in Cumberland County. It's a huge part of our economy. And in addition to that, the more acres we preserve today, that will be preserved forever for future generations to come. So I think that is a very worthwhile program. I do know, being the liaison to the Farmland Preservation Board, that it is very well managed. Our staff, Stephanie Williams and Kirk and others do an excellent job. We have a terrific dedicated board who oversees that program. And, we are moving forward with the limited dollars that were made available, only $40,000 from the general fund last year, with preserving 8 farms. We've taken action with our farmland preservation board. That's over 600 additional acres of farmland that's being preserved in Cumberland County this year. And that's through essentially innovation of taking advantage of, Marcellus Shale dollars, limited general fund contribution, and in addition to that, funding from the federal government that, we were able to obtain. So I certainly believe if the funds are available, that there ought to be a general fund component to that. I don't have a problem if the funds are available. Am I going to raise taxes to do that? No. That's my opinion. The other part of it, Katie, instead of writing as this board and prior board have done over the years, a blank check to the Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation, go spend it on, whatever you think you want to spend it on. But I think we heard, just the other day from Jonathan and the others, as they're trying to itemize now and coming up with a public purpose on why it is or how it is we should appropriate county funds. We know that the hotel tax dollars can only be used for tourism-related projects. That's the only thing they can be spent on. And I know that there's certain fee revenue that KDIC has been able to get. But do I believe that there is a public purpose for Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation? Absolutely. And my identified public purpose, if my colleagues would agree, would be to have KDIC, along with the Cumberland County Redevelopment Authority, work on the development of a coordinated, collaborative effort to essentially focus on focus on inventory and then incentivizing of existing vacant and commercial properties for reuse and redevelopment. Okay? I think that is a public purpose, and I'll tell you why. Because if we don't take care of infill development in our county, right, we're going to have deteriorated neighborhoods in a lot of areas. So we do two things. We essentially, we provide for reuse of commercial properties that are currently vacant. We try to, re-incentivize and protect the quality of life in those neighborhoods. And in addition to that, then you hopefully might prevent, essentially, the shovel going in the ground to disturb pristine farmland. And on the other hand, we move forward with a robust program to actually preserve farm acreage and the duty of our county. So those are two ideas. I think, I would like to put a number in for KDIC and for the Redevelopment Authority. I'd like to fold the downtown coordinator position for the Redevelopment Authority into that whole effort. So that's that $9,600 that we have there. And whatever that amount is, I'd like to put a number in there for KDIC for reuse, redevelopment, for the Redevelopment Authority for a coordinated program, and then that they come back to us before we give them any of that money with actually a program to implement, what I've suggested.
Well, their request is actually 12,000 on the downtown coordinator.
12, well,
And we
so-
saw the presentation from
Yeah.
Jonathan, and those showed us the 90 from the 40 that had been.
Yeah, but I'm not suggesting we necessarily have to go with their request. What I'm suggesting is that as a board, as the elected officials for the county, that we actually determine what that public purpose is. And I've made my suggestion as to what I think it should be. It certainly would be a public purpose.
I'd just like to quickly make 4 points. My recommendation would be don't fund anybody, anything. And the reason, number one, is there's no process in place to determine what alternative funding sources any of these people have. There's been no due diligence done. And if we are squeezing, there's probably been no due diligence done in many of the cases. If we're squeezing departments that we control from the general fund and demanding accountability and due diligence from them, and we should certainly be doing it from outside organizations that are asking us for money. That's point number 1. Point number 2, I love farmland, and I'd like to have open spaces. But it's far from being a no-brainer. There's a significant body of thought that says that you can accomplish the same thing that you're accomplishing through paying people not to sell their farms by zoning without any cost. You may agree or disagree, but it's not a settled argument. It is not a no-brainer. Third point, CADIC, I think, is a point of being quite nicely solved. And I wouldn't mind if we went to them someday and asked them for a grant, perhaps for some pet project that we have. And finally, what about all the other causes that are not represented on this list? What about fighting the heroin addiction and opioid-related death epidemic? Could we not give funds to organizations that are involved in the treatment and prevention of opioid addiction? We see everyday examples with child abuse. Could we not give contributions to them to have more staff to be able to better protect children? The list goes on and on and on. This list is, it hasn't been vetted properly, and it is highly selective.
I'd like to sort of jump in on the due diligence. I believe, because I've seen a few letters that have come back to finance when these organizations are presented with, you have in the past received X amount of dollars and you'd be requesting the same amount. And I, for one, have the Commission for Women, it's not an association, but that's okay, requested it gone over to finance. The conversation with that particular organization at this time, and has been brewing for quite a few years, is whether or not it will migrate to a 501c3, and whether or not the dollars that have been invested, the strategic work that they've done, the projects that they've taken on, and the years of service that they've given to the county, could this organization then move into their own standing as a 501c3? Or a conversation I had very briefly with the new director at the YWCA to see whether or not there might be a migration of the Commission for Women. And real quickly, many counties do not have a Commission for Women. We have had this program, and there is a history with this organization for about 10 or 12 years. But maybe this time, looking at dollars and resources and projects that they would like to take on might be best served either through a 501c3 or through an established agency like the YWCA. So, but I do know in the past it had been that these would present through finance kind of the rationale letter. Where have you been? What have you done? What are you currently working on? And what do you see happening in the future?
I would just say, for CAT, for years, they would come to us with a funding request. And I think, on the surface, it had all those things. You could check off the boxes. When we really delved, when we got into it in detail, okay, we found out that there was a lot of stuff that really wasn't worth us spending the money that we were asking. I am not saying that any of these organizations are guilty of as much inefficiency and bloatedness as CAT is, but the process whereby you have some kind of standard and B, some kind of acceptable level of due diligence, whether that's at a high level or low level or whatever, and that's applied consistently, then that makes sense. But without it, it seems to be, so it lends itself to be some arbitrary.
And some also receive resources or funding through a variety of other sources, either through foundations or through actually another way, that and then we sort of had that conversation of where, is there redundancies for services that are provided and what are the outcomes of that. So I would only sort of offer that and move on from there. If we're going down the list, that's a question I sort of have, or not, or address them individually or collectively look at them and next week return.
Why don't we just run down the list, say what they asked for last year, what they got last year, what they're asking for this year, ask if there are any questions. What do they do? I can see,
I can see mid-pen legal services, last year, they were awarded 10, and they requested 10 again this year.
And they provide legal services for,
I think it's domestic,
The indigent, I think.
yeah, it's people that have low income, and it's very specific types of services. I think it's landlord, tenant information, PFAs, child issues, so it's related to the indigent, the lower income. I think it's poverty level.
could you just,
I'm not sure what the level of income is, but it's.
This is a partnership effort too, I believe, with other governmental.
They do
entities.
receive funding from
Multiple
others.
Yes.
again, well, very worthy cause, but they do have other funding resources. They may or may not be adequate. And it overlaps with some of the stuff we do for our own public defender's department, as well as some of the services that are provided through children and youth services for parents who everybody can test. Again, I think they're wonderful. I would give them money from my pocket, and we should. I think we need to have a process in place to assess it. Believe me, I like those guys.
Before you go further, I got a couple things on adding here. And Larry and John, I'm going to agree with you that there really doesn't seem to be much of a framework here. There's more than there was a number of years ago. In this county, when I first came here, we were just inundated with these requests. And it was just total throwaway decisions on whether the commissioners liked them or didn't like them, whatever the reasoning was. There was nothing to essentially anchor those decisions on. And to some degree, I think we cleaned some of that up, but we have a ways to go. I'm going to argue the same point that I've made including last year, and that is there really is no framework for here in terms of how we evaluate the requests that we still have. And until there's a framework, it really is pretty arbitrary. And I have no problem with setting it as zero until such a framework's in place for a variety of reasons I'll get into in a second. But we did make the change last year. Tri-County Regional Planning Commission typically came here for a pretty big request. And the board finally recognized, after years of discussion on it, that it is a planning function and we have a county planning department. And they should be the central point for planning decisions and the budget decisions that are put in place to back up their plan. So that was folded in, Tri-County Regional Planning Commission was folded into the county planning budget request. And we relied on the planning department to provide us with a recommendation. Jim's half right. Part of what we spend with Tri-County Regional Planning Commission is contractual. It is the transportation component. However, there are various other add-ons that have gotten increasingly added on and increased in their increased add-on over the years, and those have finally come under some the type of scrutiny they deserve. And as long as they're running now through Kirk Stoner's folks, they're going to get that scrutiny because, as I understand it, he brings us that as part of his budget. So it's a matter of making the regional program, the extras, work in sync and dovetail with the planning objectives that we've charged him with carrying out on behalf of the county. Whether it's a regional initiative, it's up to Tri-County essentially to sell it to Kirk's department, and for them essentially to sell it to us, but really Kirk is the place we should be looking. He's the one who has the authority on that. So that has been wrapped under the planning budget, correctly so. The contractual part of it is certainly not subject to a lot of negotiation for obvious reasons. It is a contract. We're going to honor our contracts. So the other components are definitely negotiable, and I look to Kirk for guidance on whether those have favorable results for Cumberland County or not, and the extent to which they don't. And we've been able to make some reduction there. Personally, I think there's room for additional reduction, but I'm willing to listen to what they have to say when they come in and make their presentation, but there's a very high standard they should have to meet. Now, taking that a step further, so it seems like, Larry, you mentioned this a minute ago, mid-pen, for instance, those benefits that accrue to us, we've vetted them in the past and determined that they supposedly can provide some of these services more cost efficiently than if we were to provide them in-house. So I've been supportive of funding Mid-Penn for those reasons. But it strikes me too that instead of them bringing us a grant application every year, why is that too not folded into the corresponding budgets of those departments that are calling on them, whether it's because of children and youth, DA's office, whomever. If they want it to happen, then why are we not having them factor that revenue stream into their request to us? So I personally don't really think those should continue to be grant requests. Black fly is an area I think we need to have a little more discussion on. And apparently the state had cut black fly spending this year, and the county got the blame for it. And I know Representative Glenn Grell's office has been in touch with me a couple of times in regards to what are our plans on black fly? Are we cutting? Are we meeting our obligation on that? Because the information being put out there by the Commonwealth apparently is that Cumberland County is cutting back on black fly. And that's a very unique type of program, unique arrangement in which we're working with the state. So we need to make some decisions, maybe take a close look at that. In regards to the two big ones we've talked about earlier, CADIC and farmland preservation, candidly, if you looked at this just based on the facts, are they worthy? Certainly both are worthy. But in my mind, I don't see a substantial difference between them and what we've done with Tri-County. We have set up planning objectives through our county comp plan. Our planning department is responsible for balancing all of those objectives in a responsible way. They bring us recommendations on land partnerships, on what money should go for land partnerships. I don't understand why they shouldn't be wrapping farmland preservation, which is one of our planning goals, and why economic development, which is integrated into land use and transportation, why those things also shouldn't come to the planning department with some type of explanation as how those elements are helping us further the goals that are wrapped up in the county's comp plan. And I know it's imperfect, but there's not a whole lot of detailed strategy coming out of the commissioner's office. So the comp plan is the default. So why do we not have these recommendations coming to us with an idea of what monies are available, vetted, as Larry said, and essentially the decisions made instead of based on somebody's pet project or buying votes or whatever, that it's going to be made in alignment with the county's objectives that are stated and brought to us by professionals in the planning area who understand what we're trying to accomplish there and who could probably best advise us on the best way to apply the dollars we have to meet the objectives we say we have.
Two very quick points. Number one is tonsils. We've evolved as a species. We don't really need tonsils anymore, but we still got them. I think this program is a holdover from the time when there was plenty of money to throw around. Not that the money was misused, but there was a lot more money that could be used for discretionary stuff like this. Things have changed. Not only do we not have the money, but we have. Sam Miller comes to me and says, give me $200,000 to train my staff to do cognitive behavioral training for youthful offenders. And I know for every dollar I give Sam, it's going to produce $2.75 worth of savings for this county. Why? Because there's data to back it up. Okay? There's data that says this is a good investment. And I think we've been trying to ask that more and more and more of our own departments. And secondly, we should be asking it of these same people as well, taking into the people outside of it, taking in particular circumstances, some of which I think Commissioner Ernst and Commissioner Ackerman and Commissioner Crosswell all mentioned. I think, if we have to recognize that if we are holding our own departments to such standards, we should hold outside agencies to similar standards. The other thing is if Mid-Penn Legal Services is providing services more cost effectively than we are internally, why not outsource it, or whatever, manage competition? Why not ask them to come and bid on those services? Everything I've heard about Mid-Penn is fantastic. They're doing a great job. We'll bring them into the organization, let them be part of the organization. This, maybe this is not nearly as much as they should get in terms of not only doing good stuff for the people who it's intended for, but also improving the financial prospects of the county.
I'll make one more point, and then I will. I think we've kind of danced around the subject today of what dollars are available this year out of this year's budget. And I think that's a mistake if that's the perspective we're going to take. This year's budget looks pretty good. Look down the road at the 3 and 5 year projections, not so good. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us yet. I personally would like to see target numbers for each of those 5 years that brings us into a sustainable, balanced situation that gets rid of the, and I know you're working toward that, Larry, but I think it would be helpful, if possible, if we actually had target numbers for each year in terms of what gets us to year 5 and healthy, and a target number that we, as a board, feel comfortable living with. And then we can see how we're tracking toward a longer-term goal instead of just looking at, well, there's enough money this year, so let's go ahead and spend it, or whatever the decision would be. But let's make a longer-range projection and a longer-range decision.
Well, I'll go back to the point of, you shouldn't budget more than you're going to spend, right? And essentially, again, recent history shows that we have done that. I think you should budget what you anticipate to actually spend. Because that all determines, how much you need in revenues, And, in terms of this budget as being a good budget, I still got a lot of questions in terms of priorities. And the issue of what I said was a no-brainer, I think, if I misspoke, the no-brainer is to use the money that we're getting from the state to draw down additional money from the state for farmland preservation. That's what my intent was. Gary mentioned about the current comprehensive plan process. And, we're currently working on an economic development component, which is pretty weak right now, almost non-existent in terms of substance, all right? And again, my thought is that, depending on, what we might consider budgeting, doesn't necessarily mean we're going to spend it until we actually see a plan for the reuse and redevelopment of existing commercial properties. I'd kind of like to see us, that I think is a public purpose. And there's a lot of other needs out there. One of the questions I have is why do we have a proposed $139,000 increase for consulting services in this budget? That's line item 600550. Page 2.
We'll have to go back and get a specific.
Well, again, there we have, it's that's $139,000 increase for consultants.
We do have an answer. It's the Intel upgrade.
The what?
That's right here.
The loss of grade.
The biggest one.
Speaking to what we would need to do to break even each year, it's about 2.5% of change either in revenues or expenses per year to break even in the out years. Some of them are a little higher and some are a little lower, but it's about 2.5%.
But the notion of having target spending, I think we all agree on. That's a good thing to do. Have target spending rates, based on annual projections and everything else. So that, again, I'm sorry to use primitive audio visual, mostly visual aids, but it was like this in terms of how quickly we run out of reserves. We pushed it out here, and we kind of wanted to get it to here, so you do that by steps, and the more you have targets to go for. Those targets obviously might have to be tweaked, probably would have to be tweaked along the way, but at least it gives you a path, how you get from where we are to where you need to be.
And in a perfect world, your target would be that your revenues and your expenses balance every single year. But if you plan multiple year projects, as we sometimes do, that's overly simplistic to expect that. The point is, over the long haul, if you're going to hit the numbers that you need to do that.
There's just so much we can control.
And we are so also reliant on subsidies coming from other sources. Okay, so when they are not addressed or not at least identified, then you sort of start down a very, very bad road. I have no problem with the fund balance that we have and that we hold.
The only thing, again, go back
No
to the process, because
anticipation.
I've seen a lot of state budgets, and I asked, last week for a printout, and I was told, well, that would be 1,000 pages. Okay, I know in state government, right, you can have a printout about a half-inch thick that shows you not just general fund dollars, but shows federal and shows state dollars, or shows all the funding sources as well. And I understand Barb's argument, and that's what, I understand that, we drive all of our funding through the general fund, so you need to, you need to maintain that cushion so that, we can pay our bills.
Well, you're not going down the road of tax anticipatory note. The vendors are going to be paid, and if in fact we're weathering a scenario of no budget out of Harrisburg, the bills were paid in Cumberland, and I will continue to make those statements. And they're
That's
valid.
fine, but, we shouldn't also, essentially just, take in more from our taxpayers than we absolutely need. And, that's, again, it goes back to, so what are the real numbers? We have this anticipated spend, which I was told this morning, essentially is that, don't look at that because that wasn't updated. So, we're at 75 million, but the actual spend for this year is about $2 million below what we budgeted, right? When we passed the budget in 2014.
Yes.
And we have an extra, I don't know how many million in the fund balance that we didn't project that we were going to have at the beginning, or last year at this time when we passed the 2014 budget.
We're continually making changes to try to improve situations, so that's a positive thing that we had a higher fund balance, that we cut our expenses. We actually had a year where our salary, benefit, and operating expenses were lower than the year before. That was 2013.
I think there's a key point, okay? First of all, I'm going to shock you. I think there's Commissioner Herzog made a very good point. The whole notion of conditional funding for these folks, like with Kate. We tend to throw the money over the wall and assume that it'll be spent on things we want. To the extent that we do make funding, it should be conditional to specific things. So I think that's an excellent idea. The other thing is that this is a budgeting method, and this is a finance department that has helped us get to and even achieve the financial status that we have, not only in the markets, but also relative to other counties in terms of the lowest tax rate around. And I think that there's a method, it may seem like madness, but there's a very big method here that's at work. And that is and I think, Commissioner Armstrong, you said this, by budgeting more than we actually intend to spend, it imposes a fiscal conservatism on us that's administered through our finance department, which has done a very, very good job on this. So I think I understand it. I think we all understand it to some degree. I think we might have disagreements on approach, but this approach works. If I work backwards from the outcome, which is financial stability, low taxes, and a high bond rate, I'm not going to say this thing needs to be cleaned up or gutted or what have you. Because the alternative is if you stop allowing for those contingencies and you stop budgeting this way, the temptation will be to use that money for things that may or may not be worthwhile. Indeed, that soak up that spongibility that makes us as effective and as appealing on the financial markets as it actually does.
Or you come at the end of the year and you have a scenario that perhaps at one time had been in place, that you're buying stuff just to buy stuff, because failing to do so, you won't be funded again at that level next year, and that has stopped here. Okay, that has not, it has stopped. So departments understand that, row officers get it. This is not how we manage money in Cumberland County any longer. So I think that's important to convey. And I think it's also important to convey too that the retirement fund has been paid. So, then you kind of get in, well, what's that arc going to be this year? And there's contingencies on as address that we have very little control over, but we have to respond to, so.
I'll just make one point, and maybe it's just another way of looking at it, okay? But, you know, if you budget low, essentially you say this is how much there is to spend and no more, okay? Then when a department runs into a situation where some unexpected expense came up, they actually have to come to the Board of Commissioners, you know, and ask for a supplemental appropriation or additional funding. Whereas if you put this, bury all these extra dollars throughout the budget, all right, there's no accountability, there's no transparency for spending more than is necessary. Perhaps. I'm just saying it's a different perspective.
And as far as the grant request, I am going to again borrow from Commissioner Urso, who's had a previous times had a discussion. We've had discussion on zero-based budgeting. While I don't favor zero-based budgeting for the rest of the enterprise, I would favor a zero-based budgeting on these grants. Start from the assumption that it's zero. Make your case, demonstrate your case, validate your case, prove your case, that you deserve X, Y, and Z, and you can't get that money from anyplace else. And then we'll start to consider those. But I don't think we should start from the standpoint that there's an entitlement attached as normal and as good a work as any of these organizations.
And the outcome for the services are being provided, sort of marry up with then what our contribution is for the services that we're receiving.
Right. And as Commissioner Richard says, if you're going to give money to cater, down, you know, to put businesses back where businesses used to be, let's make sure that that money gets spent on that, not on additional subsidies for warehousing, for example.
Well, you know, in terms of justification for farmland preservation dollars, okay, I can tell you this, that we can preserve, you know, the 2015 budget year by using the $100,000 from Act 13, which is the Marcellus Shale. We can preserve 644 acres. That's real acres, you know, being preserved. If we would add a $50,000 contribution, we can preserve from the general fund, we can preserve a total of 681 acres in the 2015 year. If we had a $100,000 general fund contribution, we could preserve 717 acres forever in Cumberland County. So I think there is a real justifiable purpose for farmland preservation.
But is that the overriding objective over every other land use policy we have? I'd say no, it's not. It's one of numerous policies we've set, that every dollar you put toward that is a dollar that isn't available for something else, i.e. land partnerships, which we get a lot of value out of as well. So it's a matter of setting objectives and using good judgment to get to it. Sure, we could always get more if we spend more. You know, it's kind of the old argument, you can't afford not to save this much money.
Well, but I understand, this was a program established, I don't know how many years, 1989, I believe,
Right.
in the state of Pennsylvania. And I'm really proud to know that in Cumberland County, we preserved 16,000 acres of farmland forever for future generations to come as a result of this program, working in cooperation with the state of Pennsylvania. You know, relative to the issue of zoning, every municipality has the ability to do that. We don't have any control over that. That's the local municipality's determination as to whether or not they want to build houses where, you know, farms might be. Or you can have a program like this that actually, you know, preserves the farmland. You know? So I just think that there's worth with this, there's value with this, there's value with the KDIC programs, and I think if we identify more and give specific direction to KDIC, I think there's absolutely a public purpose there. And I think it all comes down to, are we going to be reasonable? Right? What is reasonable? What is responsible? And that's why I asked the question, how much do we have available within, after we spend whatever we're spending now more for consultants and everything else here, how much is available within recurring revenues when you look at what the real numbers are in this budget.
And I would simply raise the point to the extent that there is, at the end, or in the middle, or whatever, more money to spend. I'll go to Sam Miller and say, Sam Miller, give me more cognitive behavioral training that'll keep kids out of prison, and out of juvie that keeps them as adults out of prison, so that maybe someday they could work on farm.
We have a lot of predators, absolutely.
And they're computer.
And finding a framework for that to be a fair competition is part of our job. And you can say what is public mission or not, but we have a lot of public mission in the EDC, and it's not all just about reuse. In fact, I don't know that they've ever even identified that as a major. The goals that they were given when they were first formulated didn't include that. Now, that can certainly be one of the tools you use, but we gave them broad objectives and I said, you're the experts, you figure out how we increase employment numbers, diversify the variety of employment, raise median income, and feed the commercial tax base and the property tax base so that we can provide tax relief for taxpaying citizens. Those were the things that were outlined, and we told them, you go find out the best ways to do that.
On recruiting and retaining businesses.
And that's wrapped up in there, but.
Yeah, we have, we're in the middle of this, we're gonna have a say in this as the elected officials of the county with respect to the development of this economic development component of the comprehensive plan. And I hope we'll get to that. And I hope it includes what I consider to be an important, I hope my colleagues would agree, an important ingredient with respect to promoting reuse and
Their fact finding absolutely identified that and it's reflected in the budget request.
yeah, and what I'm saying is that it does come down to us, to determine, what public purposes are.
Well, but if we're gonna pick and choose, we should know what the heck we're talking about.
I think we heard you say 5.6 million, that was new local tax, is what we heard yesterday from EDC. Do we see that local tax come in? Or what was, did you hear that presentation?
I did not analyze this number, so I.
Okay.
As the tax base expands, we benefit from that.
Absolutely.
Every warehouse that goes in, every shop that opens up in downtown Des Moines, every one of those is paying property tax and that comes to us.
So I think that growth is about 1%.
I think
Theoretically,
that was more higher than, but that's okay.
I think we're in, I hate to sound overly cosmic here, I've been accused of that, rightfully so, in the past.
At least 3 times.
At least two. True story. But we're kind of in a new paradigm. We don't have a lot of money to spare. At the same time, one of the benefits of economic scarcity is it forces the more resourceful people to demonstrate beyond a shadow of a doubt that they can get a positive rate of return on the money invested in whatever they provide. Okay? More and more, internally within the county, the departments, children and youth, like you mentioned, juvenile probation, and others, that can demonstrate and validate their plans. I think if we hold our own department, first of all, we should be holding all of our departments to that standard to the extent that the disciplines that are involved with lend themselves to those practices. And secondly, the same should go for the folks outside. And, I think we had this discussion, I had this discussion with one of the commissioners. If you don't say what the outcomes your services produce, and you can't draw the line between the services you provide and the outcomes that we all consider desirable, like lower recidivism, higher income, more taxes, if you can't draw that line, you can claim credit for every good thing that happens based on the fact that you think that what you do is conducive to that. But we as a society, we're a little bit more sophisticated than that. We know that it's easy to take credit, but there are people who can in our programs that can show, not in a dotted line and not in a buckshot, that can show that there's stuff that produces results with positive rates of investment. And that wasn't the case 10 years ago. It probably wasn't even the case 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we had anything anyway. So now it's getting a little bit better than.
But we still quadrupled farmland preservation fund, even though.
But the point is, we're the stewards of taxpayers' funds. In essence, I think we all agree it's our job to make sure that we get the most bang for our buck. I've heard everybody in this room say that many times, and I think we're all on the same page. So I think, again, I don't want to have anybody go cold turkey. I think we do need to act responsibly, certainly contractual obligations we can't ignore this. But let's maybe start thinking along these lines, and this is going to be a long haul. But if you're talking about target numbers for the next 3 to 5 years, this should be part of that process to say how we get those target numbers.
Okay, well, we still need to come up to, for a decision because the time's short, right? You want to vote to put the budget on display on November the 6th, is that right? Or before that?
November 6th and 10th.
November 6th and 10th. So
6th to put on the workshop, 10th would vote to put on bid.
Okay.
And in the past, we have put the budget on review without decision letters. We encourage you to make the decisions early. The earlier the better we can get the numbers in the document. But it won't necessarily hold up the budget.
Right, because you do have more funds allocated for that. That's the other fund.
Right.
I know we don't normally do this, but I'll ask you, the chair. Do we want to ask for any public comment?
We do this. This is the Wednesday at 1:30 meeting, and
I don't
whether
think
we
we
just
did.
sort of started it or not, it is streaming. It is a public advertised meeting, and
No, I mean.
for the chief clerk, if who's been sort of running these, we can certainly call for public comment.
Sure, and we have to bring it up in the workshop meeting as well, so that when we pass the order. So there's yet another opportunity for public comment.
But for today's meeting,
Yes.
There's
We
not
can
gonna
put out
be-
a special request.
I think there are residents in attendance at the meeting today that would like to have an opportunity for public comment.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Right.
Right here, right now, absolutely. So, if you would please, if you are going to make any public comment, for the minutes that are being taken, identify who you are, where you reside. And public comment for all of our public meetings is limited to 3 minutes.
Try to make it through this, Madam Chairman, thank you. If I may get your copies of what I'm going to be. Vince D. Filippo, 91 Margaret Drive, Mechanicsburg, PA, resident of Silver Spring Township. I'm here today acting as a member of the Cumberland County Ag Preservation Board. I appreciate all the discussion today on your budget. It's very interesting. I say good afternoon to all of you commissioners, and first of all, thank you for the service you provide to our county. Again, I'll try to take up as little time as possible. Earlier this year, the County Ag Preservation made a written recommendation funding in 2015, and that amount being requested is $500,000 to ag preservation. Whether this amount was too little, too much, just right, the fact is that any funding from the county provides a positive impact to farmland preservation. Unlike many resources that are infinite, farmland is finite. When a shopping center, office building, or department store after many years becomes old and in need of repair, it can be rebuilt on the same parcel. When a warehouse needs renovation, it can be renovated. When a farm is covered up, it's gone. It can't be repaired, renovated, or replaced. Cumberland County, as most folks know, is some of the best farmland in the world. This is one of the county's greatest natural resources. The Ag Preservation Program has been successful and is a valuable asset to our county and to our residents as well. Reminder, the program is voluntary. It's not for everyone, but it gives farmers another option to consider. Some farmers will want to sell their land for development. They have every right to do so. It's their constitutional right. However, many farmers, such as Diane Staney, chose the alternative of preservation. Why? Because they love their land, but more important, they realize the importance that not just today preserve the farm, but for generations to come. Recently, the state of Pennsylvania celebrated 500,000 acres of preserved farmland. Governor Corbett signed a proclamation recognizing this incredible milestone. Pennsylvania leads the country in preserved farmland. To quote Governor Corbett, "I'm excited about being able to extend our tradition. Our farmland preservation program is dedicated to continuing the farming way of life by permanently securing land for agricultural production." End of quote. Agriculture today is still our biggest industry, and it brings in $7.5 billion to our state's economy. Cumberland County today has 130 preserved farms. That equates to about 16,200 acres. All of these farms are in operation and they are productive. This year, we're looking to preserve an additional 660 acres, and this year alone, we received 7 new applicants for the program. We have the applicants, but we don't have the required funding to meet the need. Part of the solution could be local voluntary preservation programs. These programs are quite popular, successful in the eastern part of the state. And as you know, recently, Silver Spring Township, through a voter referendum, approved their local program. Silver Spring has received already 11 applications for land preservation, 2 of which are working farms. I hope more municipalities will try to establish similar programs. However, the primary responsibility of farmland preservation, in my opinion, lies with the county. Our neighboring counties, York, Lancaster, and Chester, are in the top 5 counties for farmland preservation. I think they, though, might be in the top 3. We, Cumberland County, ranked 9th. Our ranking statewide is pretty good, and we should be proud of it. Credit should be given to our farmers in the program, our staff, and Board of Commissioners, past and present. We thank you. I say well done. But as you can see, we are far behind our neighbors to the east. Lancaster County has 75,000 acres preserved. York has 39,000. Chester has 33,000. Commissioners, I have to ask you, what is the goal for farmland preservation? We are blessed with superior quality soils in the county. Should we not do more to preserve it? Surveys of our citizens show the majority support farmland preservation. In the past 3 years, a total of $290,000 is appropriated from the general fund for farmland preservation. I thank you. In the 3 years preceding that, a total of $1.5 million was appropriated from the general fund for farmland preservation. I thank you for that as well. There was other funding provided as well, including Act 13, clean and green rollback taxes. And I thank you for those funds for farmland preservation. I realize budgeting is difficult, trying to be fair to do the right thing. I simply ask you to think about where we are today and where we want farmland preservation to go. We have a great natural resource literally under our feet. Considering the citizens support the preservation program, let's do what we can to keep our program strong. The ultimate decision is yours. And again, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to provide my comments. I wish all of you well. Thank you again for your service, and I apologize if I went over through.
Let me ask you, how much do you know yet on the revenue for the tax that the township voted on and supported? You know how much it's going to bring in?
About
I mean, just
yeah, 300,000.
about 300,000 a year on that tax.
Inside question, your comments, you said that, in your opinion, the county bears primary responsibility for
Yeah.
shouldering the financial burden of farmland preservation. Why?
Well, it's a state program. You folks from the county gets the matching funds. We, the local municipalities, cannot do that unless we can
Well,
work.
it can certainly serve as a pass-through conduit. So I guess the question I ask is the one that's been asked of me, which is, why would I consider substantial tax increases on people who live in towns and live in the populated section and redistribute those dollars out to 1 or 2 or 3 farmers?
I don't understand your question, but tax increase.
Increasing, when you say support, I think it's pretty clear when you're saying that we should do more and that the public supports the program. The specific questions I believe you're referring to from those polls said, would you pay more taxes for this?
Yes.
So, okay, so my question is, how do I answer somebody who says, why are we raising taxes on the entire county to benefit 2 or 3 places within the county? And also, are we not increasing the tax burden, a substantial tax burden, on all farmers for the benefit of 1 or 2 or 3 farmers?
I don't think so, Commissioner Eichelberger. The program's been in effect now for 25 years. The fact that people are willing to pay more for farmland preservation, you ask, well, why? Well, the very simple answer is it's a big part of our economy. Two, there's really no other way to protect farmland permanently other than the easement. And the fact that we're all going to need food at some point in time continues. And like I said, it's a finite resource that we're continuing to lose. Is it worth potentially paying more in taxes to keep some of this around? I think so.
One thing I hear is that the demand on the services for a farm are less than the demand of services for, I'll say respectfully, a cul-de-sac.
Sure.
Or a development.
Right.
Do we have the numbers that sort of actually bear that out in services that are provided for increase in schools, 911 calls? I mean,
Well, that-
has anyone sort of kind of looked at that? Because that, again, is what I hear.
Right.
And I think we're taking a look at, certainly the Chief Carp is talking about outcomes.
Right.
Or numbers that we can produce for that.
Farmland really presents very little cost to the community. The revenue that we receive from it, far outweighs any cost of snow plowing, road repair, that type of thing. When we did our effort in Silver Spring, that was one of the examples we had. Take a 100-acre piece of farmland, turn it into a residential development. Everybody's thinking, oh, we get all this revenue. Oh, you do. But you also have expense, and the fact that, excluding, say, a age-restricted residential development, it puts great pressure on the school systems. It costs, like in Cumberland Valley, over $10,000 per student to educate. The revenue that comes in, let's keep in mind out in Silver Spring, probably the same throughout the county, 75% of our tax goes to the school district. A very small sliver goes to the township. And relatively speaking, the small amount goes to the county.
15 cents on the dollar.
Yeah.
I know that only because Al Wickham produces this great thing,
Right.
and he's got 75 cents, and we get 15, so.
So, why preserve farmland? I mean, Diane, I'll let you get to that in a minute, but one of it is, I keep hearing the more development you have, the better financial condition you're going to be in. Well, it depends what that development is. If it's commercial, business, industrial, that's a good thing, I think. Residential development to a point is good, but when you get too much sprawl, too much development, you have a situation where you have at Silver Spring, or not, at Cumberland Valley, and it's not their fault. They have to expand their school. Why? Because there's more students. And the cost, continues to increase for the schools. The more students you get. Now, it can be argued on the other side, well, you have more houses, you have more revenue, you have more income, it'll overtake all that. We can debate that till the cows come home. But really, to me, the answer is balance of land use. You have to
Hang on a
have,
second, because what you just said to us was that we need to implement farmland preservation to stop development.
no,
Because development costs more than farmland.
No, we need a balance, and part of that balance is to preserve some farmland.
Okay, I don't think anybody here disputes that. So the question becomes, what is that amount? How did the board arrive at $500,000 as the request?
Well, we look back over the past 10 years to see, what the average was. We also decided we have so many applicants out there that we can't get to them all. A higher amount of funding would help us get to more farmers.
I guess one question I have is the balance of the contribution and what's going to be leveraged, either through federal dollars or through state dollars. I know that the federal program has been very, very robust, and that we have drawn on those dollars significantly. one question is, then the timeliness of having a farm ready to go, so that either there's not a delay in leveraging the dollars, or there is a delay and we're sort of out those dollars. So I guess for the $500,000, what might be the leverage on that if you know it?
Well, that's the thing. The federal funding, as we're being told, has dried up for the foreseeable future.
Now you're saying next year or within?
The next year, because we're spending last year's federal appropriation.
Right, we
It's about $1 million.
Yeah, we certify those dollars
Yeah.
kind of like a year late, so.
Yeah. But this year, the federal funding has dried up, which is unfortunate because our staff really worked hard to get those dollars.
Did a super job.
Then so I want to come back to the one question I asked that I guess really wasn't addressed, and that is my question about why does it become the responsibility of the taxpayers of the entire county? Your township, for instance, I believe very smartly has put a ballot referendum, ballot question on, and asked the local folks if they are willing to pay local taxes for local preservation. And that passed, and I think it passed pretty handily too, as I understand. So you've got obviously a local solution to a local problem that's going to be paid for with local resources. That strikes me candidly as a much superior alternative than coming to people who live on a quarter acre or less in our boroughs. And we just talked recently about the need to preserve our towns and keep people living in our towns as well. But we're going to raise taxes on those folks, money that ends up being transferred to one or two or three people in the rural community. Wouldn't it simply be much better to rely on a local solution if there is indeed a local problem? Because I have to tell you, each of us spoke recently at the Township Supervisors Conference. I was very disappointed Silver Spring wasn't represented there this year. I know normally you folks are there. And I asked the question of the group, of all of the township supervisors, I said, how many of you believe that you have a serious overdevelopment problem in your township? I fully expected 1/3 of the township supervisors to raise their hands. And if Silver Spring had been there, maybe we would have seen some of that. But the truth is, not one supervisor from this county in a second-class township raised their hand and said that they felt that they had any type of urgency to address the overdevelopment problem.
We're talking farmland preservation, we're not talking really
Well,
overdevelopment. As far as taxes
every
go-
reference you have made, sir, has been that we need to stop sprawl, we need to stop development.
No, I never said to stop development.
Now,
I said
you said
we need to
specific
preserve
times,
farmland.
that's true, and that's fine. But
My
there has
township-
been an anti-development message in there.
I don't think so.
And
The township I live in, sir, is the first or second fastest growing township
Yeah.
in the state.
and
And we are happy for that, but we, our board of supervisors, have determined that, well, our residents have told us we want balance in our township, and that's what we're doing.
yeah, and the
As
underlying
far
message
as-
there is we have too much development.
As far as asking people to pay a tax for farmland preservation, I think that's what the people said they were willing to do. You know, I pay a tax to Cumberland Valley, school tax, and I don't have a child going to school. But I'm okay with that.
And that's fine, that's why I'm saying that
Here's-
the local perception there will carry the day in Silver Spring Township. And that's fine, that allows you folks to make that decision. I'm curious, I still do not understand why the county commissioners are then bearing the bulk of responsibility for a redistribution of those dollars. So I'm not asking for an answer to that, we're probably just going to be we're just on a different page on that. One question I will ask you, and I know this is not a political forum, but you have informed numerous people that you are a candidate for county commissioner. And my question to you, since the only issue I've really seen you address is this issue, is are your plans, if you were sitting here today addressing the budget that we have, would you be advocating for taxes, for county taxes to increase in order to increase the contribution toward the program?
without knowing the specifics of your budget, I can't answer that question. What I will promise to do is work with my counterparts, whomever they are, to make this county a better county than it is today.
Okay, well, the entire budget is online and has been for years,
I will look at
along with narrative that explains exactly what we tried to do. It's the most transparent budget probably in the state of Pennsylvania. See numerous awards for it. So I would hope that if you're serious about request for public office, that you would do us all a favor and bring informed answers to the types of questions you will be asked about that budget. Because it's, I can tell you, sitting up here, it's very time demanding to hear requests for more money from the budget from essentially every interest that we have in the county. There are many, as we discussed a little while ago, Larry pointed out. We have to parse out what are the things that are that give us the return on investment, the things that we're going to fund versus the things we have to say no to, even when a lot of times we don't want to say no to. So I would simply hope that you would avail yourself of the documentation that's available in the budget and be able to provide an answer to that question that's
So
answered.
let me ask you folks this question. Why don't you run or set up a voter referendum for county residents to vote on? Would you support
For a county,
a farmland preservation?
I don't believe we have the legal authority to do that in Pennsylvania.
No.
It's
And-
For the same reason we can't do a 911. Okay, can't do a 911, 50 cents, I would be so no. Not gonna be able to happen.
Even if we could, and I'm not opposed to that, I think that, that is the most direct form of democracy there is. But it still does not address the question of the redistribution of dollars. And I can tell you, there are a lot of folks on the West Shore who don't necessarily see the value of the existing program. And I'm a supporter of the existing program. The Farmland Preservation Program has had unanimous support, I believe, since its inception in this county. The dollar amounts have been in question, and the timing of the dollar amounts that are allocated in question. But I think everybody sees some value to it who has served in this office. No, the public may not. And it would be an enormous outreach and education undertaking for whoever wanted to put that on the ballot and try to get that passed, because I'm not so certain it would pass, despite what that particular survey may have said, and whenever it was conducted. Things do change as well. We're going through struggling with that question right now regarding the library tax, which was passed in this county, and we still have to determine whether minds have changed on that, and ultimately some of the responsibility just falls to us as well. But I frankly just don't see why a local decision doesn't take precedence over a county-wide decision. So I think I've asked the question.
The only comment I would make is I live on the West Shore. I live in East Pennsboro Township. I don't believe we have any farms left. And served as 22 years as a township commissioner there. Before that, I served on the school board. And I will say, as a county commissioner, that I do see the value to the county as a whole to be responsible in terms of what we can do to preserve farmland into the future. Now, the question comes down to, and I think Barry mentioned it, so what is reasonable, what is responsible? This is one of the priorities that we have. It's not the only priority. Certainly, I haven't voted for any tax increase to pay for farmland preservation. But what we have, I have not. The fact is that, what we have done since I got here is that we, the budgets that I voted on, we included, I believe, $50,000 from the Marcellus Shale in 1 year, and then the next year, $100,000. I'd like to continue to do that. And I want to just, Barb mentioned, what is the match and so forth. And these are just some numbers, and I'll throw this out there. But if we in 2015 would use $100,000 again from Marcellus Shale, and then you have funding that comes back from Clean and Green, Horn Baker, IPA, private donations, and that gives a total county contribution of, not using any county general fund dollars, of $200,000. Okay, We get a state grant of $662,856. And then because of that contribution, we get a state match of $246,709. If we were to contribute just an additional $50,000, let's say $50,000 from the general fund, instead of that state match being $246,000, we would get a state match of $307,000. Okay, and that again allows us to preserve more acreage. What I will say, again, and I emphasize this because of the program and how well managed it is through the efforts of the Farmland Preservation Board and our staff at the Planning Commission, that we have run a really robust program. We're preserving, moving forward this year, we're preserving 8 farms when usually what's been going on recently is 4 to 6 farms a year. So, we have been able to make the program work even during what I'll refer to as these ongoing difficult financial times. But, I think this is a priority for our county as a whole. You take a look at the article that came out, letter from the CEO from Cadic, okay? Cadic recently completed an analysis on the state of the agricultural economy for Cumberland Valley. We analyzed 2012 data to 2007 for comparison. Over this period of time, we realized various trends in the industry, such as a 9% decline in the number of farms, 1,550 farms in 2007 versus 1,415 farms in 2012. Total acres of farms decreased 2%. 157,388 acres in 2007 versus 154,879 acres in 2012. The average size of farms increased. And then it points out, the economic impact on the commodity side. The 3 highest value sales of commodity groups were milk from cows at 70 million, grains, oilseeds, dried beans, and dried peas at 39.1 million, and cattle and calves at 27 million. Agriculture represents approximately 35% of total land use in Cumberland County, which represents the single highest land use category. This is a big part of our economy, and I think that, there's other benefits to farming other than, the economic impact, in terms of protecting our environment from, making sure that we have places for all the water to flow, and not speaking now in technical terms, but the bottom line is this is a true benefit to our county. So I think it's important for us to continue to move forward in a fiscally responsible way. Nobody's talking about increasing taxes, at least I'm not, for farmland preservation, but it is a priority.
Have you ever seen the runoff from a dairy farm?
What's that?
I said, have you ever seen the runoff from a dairy farm? I'm just making a humorous point, frankly, so.
Okay.
There are environmental pros and environmental cons, so.
Yeah, there are.
Yes, ma'am.
Diane Staney, I'm at Mummer Township, and if I look extra haggard, I just had my 7th generation, the 2-year-old great-grandson this morning, so, but anyway, I'd just like to add that 1 out of every 7 jobs is agriculture related. And I'm on the state board, and I've seen something, I was totally amazed right now. The farm value has increased, and the development value has not. And the dollar value right now for preservation is unbelievable. In fact, I have second thoughts on some things, because right now we have 3 farms we actually preserve, and 2 that we bought preserved. And we just bought one here in Bowling Springs. It's just right out, it's right in the town there. Now we have water and sewer there. We really have to study. There are pros and cons too. There's development and there's also farming. But this, like Chester County and Bucks County, I know their values are so high. I could not believe the land value has gone up. The difference right now between land and development is it's a real buy for the county or anyone who's preserving ground. I'm just amazed.
What is the gap there? because if the gap is shrinking, that actually would be an argument against buying easements. The market's taking care of the problem.
Actually, though, it's really, I think for the farmer, makes you wonder sometimes. But it's really, I think it's good for the county because you are getting ground that is, in 2002 is when we preserved. They're getting about, right now, what we got in 2002, which I was surprised. I thought would be a lot higher. The difference, but no, the increased ground is getting so demanding right now.
Sure.
And that's why it's going up so in price. And it's value of farming, because like, as I say, once you lose that ground, and we're losing 50 acres an hour. Since 2007, we've lost 100,000 acres of producing ground here. Pennsylvania's done a fantastic job, and this county too, there's no doubt about it. And I just think that we really should applaud it. There are 57 of the counties that are participating in it. And I will correct, I think I agreed with Commissioner Hertzler there. Our county program is 25 years, but I think the state started in 88, but our county started in 89. I think that's the way it is. But I was an eye-opener that the amount of, we did 66 farms there on the day of this 500,000. Believe it or not, it was World Food Day also, World Food Day. And we preserved 6,293 acres right after the dedication of our 500,000. And that was 66 different farms. The highlight of the big one was Lancaster, and then Chester and Bucks were the ones. But I just was really amazed at the difference, how it has changed. And it's in demand, and land rent. Oh my goodness, land rent. We're battling. I mean, we rent from about 22 landlords too, and it just keeps going up. But I will say one thing, the grain price has dropped, but we're getting a nice production too. But at the same time, I'll tell you, milk's pretty decent right now, and beef. If you've bought any beef or eaten out lately, beef is nice, yes. But it's amazing how things have changed. But I will say, there is a happy medium. You do have to consider where you're located and what you're doing. But zoning won't cover it all, because it's not perpetuity. It's who's in the different zoning positions and so forth.
A question on that, in terms of the permanence to see of it, since farms do change hands, and obviously that will change hands, as all things do, does the restriction against selling that comes with an easement narrow the saleability of it? Narrow the number of buyers at all?
No, if they're buying farm. If they're not buying for development, they're buying farm, and
But
that's,
they're buying a farm that essentially is locked down.
yeah,
that
it's
never
locked
used
in, it goes with the deed.
But they're taking, as any business person, you're taking on an obligation that has
Right.
a certain amount of risk to it.
Yes.
And inevitably, it's going to change hands. Either you're a successful farmer and you just age out of business, or you're not so successful farmer and you may want to have the right to sell for development 20, 30, 40 years from now, when the economy may look very different. My question is, does the lockdown narrow the number of folks who might be willing to buy it because of its long-term investment potential, either for farm or for development?
They would
You're
have to
simply
buy.
limiting their flexibility.
It'd have to be for farm. But I will say one thing, you said about runoff. Now, you can't even apply without a nutrient management plan. Right now, we're going through a comprehensive nutrient management plan that started in May a year ago, and it should be finished within the month.
And they
That's
also
a fairly
got,
recent change to the
Yes,
process.
it is, and it's, yes.
Up until just a few years ago,
Yes.
anybody who applied,
You could
this was
go.
the government act
Mhm.
setting two different standards. We demanded a nutrient
Right.
management program, but then we also were giving money to farmers who refused to comply with the nutrient management program. Now we brought those things into sync,
Right.
which should have been done a long time.
But it's interesting, one quote here is family farming, feeding the world, caring for the earth. That sums agriculture.
all right, there are any additional public comments? Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm conscious of this, but I think Gary brought it up, said recently, that every farm that's been approved for preservation is required to undergo a conservation plan now.
And we're inspecting.
Huh?
We get inspections too.
Yes,
Mhm.
so, I mean, in
And that's
terms of
not always been the
in terms
case.
of runoff and all that, that's being addressed as part of the farmland preservation.
Chesapeake Bay, I mean, they're after us big time.
I just want to, unfortunately, I just want to congratulate the young man who was much better behaved than any of the girls.
You're long enough to almost be an Eagle Scout.
Because it's a little.
I know.
Anybody,
Anyone else?
anyone else, public comment? I know we're kind of running, we're running late, but it's been a very good discussion, so.
Commissioners, I just want to say thank you for having us here.
I just wanted to reiterate a point, Larry, for the purposes we have here. You know, it's somewhat good this turned into a debate on the specifics of the issue. We're going to continue to see that, and that's healthy. But our goal is we have to come up with a framework to make allocation decisions. And it has to be on something logical, and that's where this discussion should lead. And I would hope we would give some consideration to some of the things that have been suggested.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.